I remember it was at the end of 2004, before the tour, the first tour or the rehearsal or anything began. I thought to myself, looking at the tour schedule, I knew we had this massive gap around Easter time in our tour schedule, and I suddenly thought, God, you know, we could possibly take the show to France and come back and finish at the Riverside. And I thought, God, that's amazing. This play, it's all about Jacques Luceron and his activities in France during the Second World War, to take it back to France. And I just got totally kind of mesmerised by this idea and saw the possibility so clearly. I started to ask around contacts of mine about any theatres in France that people might know about that I could approach. And this is how the whole Peter Brook strand developed, really, because a contact of mine who was working at the Theatre Museum at the time that holds the Peter Brook Awards every year, the Empty Space Awards, she said, what about Peter Brook and the Bouffe du Nord, which is his theatre in Paris? And so I wrote to him and told him about the production. He, well, his assistant contacted me and said he's very interested. Certainly in coming along to rehearsal, would you be up for that? And I said, well, yeah, thinking nothing would come of it. And sure enough, when we started rehearsals in the January, suddenly we got another call saying, well, Peter Brook's in England rehearsing at the Barbican, and he would like to come to a rehearsal with you. So that was quite shocking to me that they actually followed up what they said they would. They said that their theatre was under renovation or something, so it wasn't going to be possible for us to go there in that Easter break. But nevertheless, we had this contact with Peter Brook, which was great, you know, to have such interest from a renowned theatre director as him.
Peter Brook sits next to Maria in a circle of actors. Actors involved in an exercise where they dash across the room as Peter Brook, an elderly man with short grey hair, wearing blue jeans and a leather jacket, stands and observes. The company mingle, talking to Peter Brook. He shakes hands with a number of the actors.
Thank you very much.
Anyway, back in January, during the first Resistance rehearsals, Peter Brook had visited our rehearsals, and it was quite a phenomenal day. I couldn't quite believe that this awesome presence was going to arrive at this little youth club in Norwood and watch a day of our rehearsals, and we were all totally kind of fazed by this and weren't quite sure what to do, whether we should just go ahead and just carry on having a bog standard day where any fights or rows could erupt as they usually had been doing during rehearsals, or to try and set up something special to avoid all of that happening. So Eileen decided to set up something special, which was a sort of a long drama exercise, which is attempting to get the actors into the present and not into acting or anything. And Peter Brook arrived with his entourage and sat downstairs with me, and we had a chat about Jacques Luceron, Alexander technique, Oliver Sacks, etc., etc. And then he came up into rehearsals and Eileen began, and Peter Brook sort of walked around the space and watched what we were doing.
Peter Brook, a fine-featured small man with his hands behind his back, observes the company as they do an exercise in a circle.
And stayed for about an hour and a half. The only
Peter Brook, a fine-featured small man with his hands behind his back, observes the company as they do an exercise in a circle. Members of the company, including Maria, are crouched low on the ground. Maria works with James, one of the actors, palm to palm, being led as others do the same in the background.
The only frustrating thing was that one of his people kept interrupting Eileen's exercise, which was like heinous in terms of Peter Brook's philosophy. You don't ever do that, but she did with us and asked Eileen to show us some scenes, show us some scenes. So Eileen then had to stop everything and show some scenes. And we were really pleased actually with the way these little scenes went, considering, you know, things were at a pretty fragile stage at that point. And then Peter Brook shook hands with everybody and left, and that was that. And I didn't hear anything else from him, and you know, I didn't contact him again after that, because the thing that I wanted was a venue in France and he wasn't willing to give me one, so I thought, well, forget it. And then in the summer he called me out of the blue and said, how did it all go? And I told him, and I said, but we're bringing it to France, you know. And he said, oh, really? He said, I want to come and see it. He said, would you book me some tickets? And I said, yes. And he said, and maybe we could think about doing it at my theatre. And I thought, oh, that's a change, turnaround, isn't it? And I said, well, all right. I said, come and see it first, you know. So that was the big plan, that he was going to come to Versailles and see the show there. But we had the general strike, which meant that everything like stopped in France, transport and shops and breathing. And so the day before the show, his office rang and said he wouldn't be able to get out of Paris and get to us in time. It wasn't going to be possible, and I was gutted, really upset. But you know, what can you do? The show goes on. You just have to, you know, you can't just give up at that point. And I thought, well, if he can't get there, I mean, who is? I mean, what kind of audience are we going to get?
Actors in rehearsal carry out an exercise where they move very slowly. Maria sits next to Peter Brook. Actors in a circle chase each other as part of an exercise. Eileen, the director, speaks to actors. Peter Brook talks to the actors and shakes their hands.
Thank you very much.